Hi guys, welcome to this tutorial. I'm looking today at the paper 2. I'm looking at the summer 2019 paper, and in this tutorial I'll be looking at question 2. So this is the boaty paper. So we've got the extract with Ben Fogle and James Cracknell. And then there's the Hudson kind of travel writing. I'm working under the assumption that you have read the extract. If not, pause here so that you can read through it. And here. And then here. And then in terms of source B, you have a read of that, pause it there. And again here. And again here. Okay. So, do you know what? This question of across all the papers is probably the one I dislike the most, because the examiner's really asking you to do quite a lot for something that's only worth 8 marks. And I think it's always about, with this question, putting it into the context of it is only worth 8 marks in actual fact. And sometimes students get bogged down, and I see that they spend absolutely ages on it. And I understand that, because you're referring to 2 sources, which makes it tricky. And you know, you need details, so you need quotes from both, you need to use inference skills, you need to summarise what you've learned about the boats. So I think it's really, I just really think this question's a main question, because it's getting you guys to do a lot for something that's not worth that much. But be that as it may, my personal opinions on this aside, let's think about how we're going to tackle this. So as always with this, you're going to refer to both of the sources, and you're going to be asked to summarise what you understand about something. And I think summary, again, is helpful language. You do need to sum up, but I always think of this as the inference question, because the summary in itself is not enough. You've got to read between the lines to get those higher marks, to get a grade 4 and above. You've got to not just be summing it up, but you've got to be inferring it and reading something into that. And so it's tricky, and you know, I think the best way for us to look at this is just to go through a response and me to talk through exactly what I did in it. My approach for this tends to be to pretty much start off with source A and summarise everything I want to about that, and then go on to source B and do my inferences of that, finding some you know, differences along the way if I can. And then normally what happens is I think I've summed up everything, and then as I kind of go through my answer, I think of something else. And that's definitely what I did with this answer, so I'll point that out to you as well. I think there's nothing wrong with that as an approach. Hit up the first source, get your quotes, get your inferences, and then go on to your second one. So, I've said, I started with in source A, we learned that the boat is tiny, and yet, despite it being small, it had coped well with the stormy conditions. You'll notice that I use embedded quotes a lot here. What I definitely don't do is, I don't zoom in on the words, because that would be a language style question, and it's not asking you to analyse language, it's just asking you to use details. So that's why you'll find a lot of embedded quotes in this. So, we learned the boat is tiny, and yet despite it being small, it had coped well with the stormy conditions, showing that it must be very well built and highly suitable for the journey. So this bit, inference, the point I infer something, I read into it, put my own spin on it. Equally, when the boat is being battered by the enormous waves, we learn that it sprang upright, which reinforces the idea that it's robust and surprisingly stable for such a small rowing boat. Okay, so this bit, this is my second inference. It shows that the engineering and technical aspects of the boat must have been superb if it could withstand such an onslaught. Okay, I've got my third inference about those little quotes there at the top. You notice I haven't zoomed in on tiny makes us think the world is small. They're just used there to, as a reference, as a detail, but I'm not expected to analyse that language. So in source B, the vessel is a ship and is powered by steam, showing that it is much bigger. Okay, it's an obvious difference then between them. So I've highlighted a difference between the texts. Surprisingly, given its size, it feels far less safe and once it gets into difficulties, becomes stuck and unable to withstand the storm. So I've got differences, and I'm also sort of inferring something about what it's not capable of doing, basically. So I would say it's not as strong maybe as my other ones, but this would probably be my kind of fourth inference. In fact, there is a fear that it would turn over once and for all. So again, see the way I'm using embedded quotes here, which shows that surprisingly it's a less safe, more unstable vessel. So we've got this kind of a difference, which is my second difference I've put in. The boat is also much less prepared for its journey. This is my third real difference here. Rather than being brand spanking new, it is described as old, ancient, and much damaged and groaning, which implies it was highly unsuitable to be used for any journey, never mind one involving challenging weather. So I've got another inference, and just checking back, this is my sort of fifth inference. I think the condition of that boat means it just wasn't appropriate. I don't know why I've put as groaning there. Sorry, I'm distracted by my own bad grammar. Apologies for that. I think I just meant and groaning. Although it is a rickety, dangerous ship, it does at least have a lifeboat. So this is another detail. You know, I've got a number of details here about the boats, which is part of what this question is asking me to do. So, you know, I've been doing this as I go through, but that's an example of where you've got a summary. Whereas the boat in source A is all the men have. If it were destroyed, then they would certainly die. So again, I've got another difference. I think that's my fourth one. Both boats get into difficulties, but in source A, this is due to rogue, terrible weather, whereas in source B, it seems to be caused by the unsafe nature of the ship rather than the destructive power of nature. So we've got another difference, this is my fifth one, you know, I'm interpreting or inferring, you know, why these boats get into difficulties. So I hope you can see from this that I just think it's a weird question, you know, but I think your best approach is to try and do all your summaries and inferences about one, and then move on to the second one, making some links as you go. You know that I said about I try and make all my points, and then as I go through it, I sort of forget, which is kind of what happened to me in this sort of latter part of my answer. I was like, oh yeah, I wanted to mention this thing about the lifeboat, and also I wanted to make this point that this boat is only in difficulty because the weather is so bad, whereas this one really is in trouble because of the, you know, it's a wreck and it shouldn't be being used anyway. So there's no problem if you do this. You know, I don't mind marking these where there's a bit of a patchwork where, you know, they come back, students come back to a point, bring in another difference, bring in another inference. So this would be an 8 out of 8, and therefore, you know, full mark, grade 9 response. Hopefully you can see it's not doing anything like crazy analytical evaluative. It's just got clear summary, it's got details. I found the differences between them. I've made plenty of inferences, and I've got those details. I haven't zoomed in on language, which is a real pitfall for this question. I've just used those quotes to support the details I'm making within my summaries. Okay, I hope that was useful, and see you next time.